1,000 guys over at Facebook
Oh, nice.
watching. So expect the tough questions, huh?
Oh no. This is gonna be Mig's first and last episode where he joined.
I kid.
Okay, we're live now.
Oh, we're live. All right. This is completely unscripted, so we're just gonna do it live. All right. Thank you guys for joining, my fellow panelists, and thank you to the viewers at home for tuning in. If you don't know, I'm just going to give a little bit of context for what we're here to talk about today. We're doing a series of webcasts, of which this is episode 1, and we're going to be talking about topics and concepts and points of view that connect blockchain and crypto and the gaming community. There's a lot of topics in the news. There's a lot of trends going on at the current time that discuss sort of the merging communities and the merging worlds of crypto and gaming, as you know. And so, this is a great way for us to get together some very esteemed guests in both industries to discuss some of those topics, to dispel some of those myths, and maybe to even confirm some of those myths. So without further ado, I'm just going to give everybody a chance to introduce themselves. I'm John. I'm the CEO of Team Secret. If you don't know us, we are a global esports team, and we run competitive esports teams all over the world, primarily focused in Europe and in Asia. And we play, pretty much everything you can think of. Probably some of your favorite games like Dota or League of Legends or Valorant. So that's my intro, and I'll pass it over to you, Migs.
Hey guys, good evening here in the Philippines. My name is Miguel Lopez. Formerly, I'm a fund manager. I'm currently doing games and esports business development for a company. My interest would be video games, of course, and also the introduction of play to earn and your cryptos and your NFT. So really exciting market, really the wild wild west frontier. Really happy to be part of this group. Thanks, John. Maybe Ziori. Oh, Ziori.
You're speaking into a void. I
Yeah,
think you're muted.
yeah.
Oh my gosh, I did mute myself. I'm so embarrassed and I'm so sorry. I'm so excited to be here though. I think I first met John at a Dota event. Was it the KL Major or maybe the Super Major? One of those. And we did like a live interview podcast thing on the official PGL channel. I remember feeling nervous. I remember thinking you seemed nervous. And I'm glad that years later we could come together and talk about the new intersection of my favorite activities, esports, gaming, blockchain, cryptocurrency. This is the beginning, man. Web 3.0, Esports 2.0. Here we are, and I'm ready for it.
Well, I can't follow that with too much more excitement, but I'm Noah, everyone. I work at Uniswap. Uniswap is, if you don't know, one of the largest decentralized exchange on Ethereum. We can explain what that means, but no worries. It's basically just a piece of software that people are using to transact and exchange value in new ways. I've been there for a few years now, so I've seen a lot about, a lot of development in the crypto space. And maybe more importantly, I'm a longtime Dota and Valorant player as well. So really excited to kick this off with you guys.
Nice.
All right, cool. I mean, why don't we start with the first topic, which is the topic that everybody's here to talk about, which is NFT gaming. Where do you see the market going? Where are we now? And what are some of the things that you see in the horizon?
I can maybe jump in first on this one. So for those of you that don't know who I am, I've spent the last 10 years mostly working in esports. I worked for Beyond the Summit for a while, and then I started my own studio called Moonduck TV that mostly did live events in the Dota 2 space. I did some hosting and some play-by-play and that kind of stuff. I joined crypto and blockchain full-time about 8 months ago with Axie Infinity. I work for the parent company, Sky Mavis. That's the developer that makes Axie Infinity. And I'm the content creator and esports program lead. So I'm the guy that's working on building up our esports scene and kind of building the infrastructure and all of the business and networking that happens around that. You need players and casters and organizations and sponsors and all these groups to kind of grow together and kind of scale alongside one another. So this is really exciting for me, seeing these two technologies start to cross each other. And I've been following blockchain for a long time. I actually tried to make a game in 2018 during the ICO era. It was way harder than I thought it would be. So we basically gave up and said, wow, Axie's already beat us to the punch. And kind of funny that 3 years later, I'm now helping them build their esports systems. But I think what's so cool about this form of gaming is that you can build economies that put a lot more of the value in the ecosystem into the hands of the players. The game assets are much more transferable and easier to sell on this free marketplace. And it's also a great use case for NFTs. I often hear people kind of say they don't really get collectible art or really get what's the point? Why is the certificate more valuable than the art piece itself? And I think if art is already a little hard to wrap your brain around. Fine art really is kind of weird, even in the physical world, millions and millions of dollars for single paintings. So to me, NFT gaming is this great application of utility NFTs as game assets that do different things to interact with these game environments. It just kind of makes perfect sense to me. And, I think there's a lot to that. So sorry, that was a long-winded starter here, but I think that's kind of maybe where we're at right now, the very beginning of realizing the power of this new utility.
Yeah, and I think the use case is particularly interesting and important because when you think about game cosmetics, right? It's not like a new concept or anything like that. And even in-game economies or even in-game economies that relate to out-of-game economies, I've been kind of trading skins or looking at different cosmetics and stuff since like the early days in high school when I was playing CS:GO, right? And the in-game out of game economies is like back when I was playing like Diablo 2, for instance, like SOJs, or when you're
Mhm.
farming gold in World of Warcraft, you can buy gold in exchange somewhere to deposit into your account rather than going to farm gold, right? Things like that, where you would do these you would do these transactions in sometimes less than reputable websites or third-party sites, and it wouldn't be so transparent, nor would it be very as accessible as blockchain has made it today. And so I think with this technology, I think it really gives a great use case to gaming to make sure that whatever assets that you sort of develop or that you gain within a game, it's on a marketplace for the community. It's accessible. There's transparency, and you control that asset, right? So it's not like some game publisher can come by and just say like, oh, that no longer exists anymore, and that's like banned,
Well,
and
and
I think
think
that's part of
about
the beauty.
most of our favorite games have a strong economic element, like World of Warcraft, Diablo, even
Sure.
Counter-Strike, Valorant. All of these games have an economic aspect that is a key part of the gameplay and adds a lot of value to the gameplay itself. So if you take that concept and that framework and then just put it in a system of money that can be cashed in and out for actual fiat currency or used to purchase stuff, it just ups the stakes of the same kind of games that I think most of us have really enjoyed over the years.
Totally. And one thing that's interesting to me is there's often an element of fungible and non-fungible currency. I mean, I think these are concepts
Mhm.
that sound a bit crazy when you hear about them. NFTs, fungibility. What is this stuff? But really, it's just like gold is the fungible thing. Any piece of gold is the same as another piece in Dota and all these games. But then there are these non-fungible things like skins, right? Like skins are unique and rare, and that's what makes them cool. You had to have been at the event to get the party hat or whatever.
Mhm.
And I think that systematizing what these terms mean in a way that isn't dependent on a publisher, or can't sort of be changed by balance mechanics, or has to have sort of broad community support to be changed. I think that this interplay of fungibility and non-fungibility and how you can exchange one for the other, things like this are extremely interesting to see evolve in decentralized systems, in free marketplaces. And I think that a shared infrastructure upon which game assets can be built and traded upon is the idea behind crypto gaming. I think that's the promise of the space. And I think Axie is one of the earliest companies to start experimenting with this. But I think we're going to see more and more and more games sort of develop and grow up with this shared infrastructure layer. And I think what's really interesting to me is thinking about actually interoperating between game platforms, in addition to within the sort of closed economy of a single game. So I don't know if you have anything to say about that, Zaire. No leaks, of course, but I think that's just an interesting aspect here.
Yeah, no, I think you're totally right. And I've heard people say, well, that could happen already. And it's like, what humans could do is a lot different from what humans do in terms of financial
Mhm.
incentives in the real world. And if you think about having all of these games, like Ronin, the side chain that Axie exists on, is just a clone of Ethereum. So in terms of being backwards compatible, it doesn't get any better than that. So if you have this huge ecosystem of Ethereum and like Ethereum adjacent games from these other blockchains that are also Ethereum clones, like Polygon, for example,
Mhm.
all of a sudden you have this network of NFTs and game assets that are all kind of speaking the same language. And it gets way easier to start connecting them together in a very organic way that's great for consumers and probably going to be pretty good for publishers too. So like, could that exist with our current system? Absolutely. But it gets really log jammed by these complicated IP licensing agreements and all the work that has to take place to build these bridges across these giant black boxes that are the current IP. And in most cases, if you have a big enough share of the market, it generally kind of feels like it's not worth it to build those bridges because you could just keep building your own skyscraper instead. So, sort of abstract analogies. But yeah, Migs, I'd love to hear your take on this as well.
No, I actually have a confession. Axie is my totga, or the one that got away in terms of my investments in P2E. Like I like I only found out about Axie, or at least the sustainability of Axie as a program and as a game, like around June or July. Like for me, I was kind of too late, but I think I'm starting to, maybe have a second guess, maybe allocate a lot a considerable amount of resources. What makes it considerable for me is that I do think that Axie has a firm roadmap, not just on the games development side, but also on the esports side. And I would love to hear what Axie would have to offer in terms of, do you read is Axie esports on the horizon? Is it soon, or is it gonna
Yeah.
be, is it gonna be, within the year and whatnot?
So it's a combination. Like Origin is a big unlock for us, which is
Mm-hmm.
coming soon, hopefully a matter of months. But then once that comes out, it's going to take a little while for the meta to settle down and things to get fine tuned. And I'm sure in terms of balance, there will be a couple of key balance patches in that first quarter, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to kind of get all that stuff figured out before we can really launch the full esports engine. I think we definitely envision like an Axie Pro League kind of model long term. Obviously, I come from the Dota space, so I'm a little bit more biased towards that third-party model that gets supported by the developer, and then we run sort of a major league that has some kind of an AxieCon World Finals, world champion kind of vibe every year. I think that's a really cool way to wrap up the season. I don't think we're going to do a franchise model like League of Legends with slots or something like that. I think it'll be a little more third party driven. But I think Dota was really ahead of the curve in a lot of its esports features, like Dota TV and its like tournament ticket system. And in the past, your ability to crowdfund tournaments with these digital goods, like the way we launched the first summit when I worked at Beyond the Summit, that wouldn't have really been possible without those in-game financing tools, because a lot of it went to the prize pool, but like 20% of it or something went into our pocket to use for expenses like flights, hotels, gear for the tournament, that kind of stuff. And when you're a scrappy startup who's literally like, we can't afford a venue, so we're going to move out all of our furniture and then turn our house into a like tournament LAN cafe for a month, that's that's like every penny helps. It really makes a difference. So I think things like that are really a big inspiration for us in enabling like third parties and entrepreneurship and business models on top of that. Even like the workshop, that whole ecosystem that Valve has created, where creators can make digital goods, kind of put them up for everybody to see, and then the popular ones have access to this distribution channel. I really like aspects of that model. So yeah, I think we'll take some inspiration there and try to build out an Axie Pro circuit. That's really the plan long term. But I don't think that kind of pro league is coming until like 2023, 2024. We still have a lot of building to do. Right now, we're just doing the esports grants. We just did like a $500,000 grant that'll go to probably like 100 tournaments or so, something like that, and try to spread it out globally, and just start building up some storylines and start having enough content that you can have full-time casters, which means you can start having more full-time players and full-time fans. And, is that whole three-way chicken and the egg thing where you can't have tournaments without the players, and you don't really have players the same way you do without the fans. And without the fans, the tournaments don't really make sense. So you kind of need all of them. So we're working on that nexus point right now. That's the game plan.
Oh, that's awesome. I want to ask John and Noah. Axie's been in the center of the whole play to earn use case and on the play to earn success story. I'd like to ask, like, what's the role of Team Secret and Uniswap in terms of promoting, number one, cryptocurrencies, and number two would be NFTs and your play to earn.
Yeah, so I guess I'll start with this. I think the role of Team Secret is, I think play to earn games. The aspect that really that I find really interesting and I find really attractive is the aspect of community, right? Which is why I also think like Dota, for instance, is a good kind of segue into play to earn game, because what you mentioned, right? Like the Games Workshop, artists contributing to a marketplace, like crowdfunded prize pools. Those things are all like community driven by and large, right? And it's kind of like the democratization and the decentralization aspects that are also found in cryptocurrency, in decentralized finance, for instance, like those types of concepts, right? And so I find this like incredibly interesting and incredibly attractive from a esports brand point of view, because we have like the communities that have really strong voice. Like if I say something controversial, I say something like totally off the wall, like it's gonna be on Reddit, right? and the community is gonna roast me for it. So like these types of concepts, I lend itself to this universe, and I think that having a community like this is the role that we are going to take, which is we're going to build a community that is, part of our community is interested in Dota, part of our community is interested in other games, Valorant, Wild Rift, League of Legends, etc. Right, and I'm sure part of that community is also interested in NFT gaming. So we're going to cultivate that part of the community, right? We started our own guild to get scholars in, to teach them how to play, to get them engaged into our sort of ecosystem, our team secret ecosystem. So not just like NFT gaming, but a lot of those scholars actually in the Discord, they talk every night. They queue up for Valorant sometimes, right? And it's that community that I think we can bring to crypto gaming. And I think on the esports side, of course, there's a natural fit. If there's a strong esports ecosystem and it makes sense for us to have like more of a professional team and compete and those types of things, it's more of a a direct fit. But I think on the community side is what I'm looking forward to the most.
Yeah, and from Uniswap's perspective, I think so. Just to give a very brief intro again, we're a piece of software on the Ethereum blockchain designed to sort of exchange assets. So you have asset A and asset B, gold from Dota and gold from Valorant. You can exchange those at some market determined clearing price. And what's interesting to me about this problem is it's actually kind of simple. But ultimately it's this massive rabbit hole, right? And so the more you dig into it, the more complexity and interesting problems there are. And so what we at Uniswap really want to do is be emblematic of what a sort of good faith actor in the crypto ecosystem looks like, right? This is an extremely new technology. These things have in some ways been tried before, but never in as sort of a Wild West of a setting, right? There are analogies to what we're doing in the traditional finance world, for example, but we've taken things really to an extreme because of the power and the freedom and the flexibility that crypto and blockchain gives you. And so again, we're operating in uncharted territory here. And I think it's really important that we both build our products with a sense of sort of responsibility and basically are extremely transparent with everything we do. So we open source basically 95% of our code. We have really active sort of open source ethos. We have communities that are sort of keeping us responsible, that are asking us questions. We're responding to them in public, things like that. So I think that's sort of our ethos. We want to embody the principles of developing and building on top of Ethereum to the world, and we want to attract new entrants to this space. And so I think partnering with Team Secret was sort of a natural fit for us, because I think gamers are really, as John mentioned and as I already mentioned as well, they're really embedded in this digital world where fungible goods and non-fungible things are sort of natural, right? Like there are very clear analogies between gaming and crypto in a lot of ways. And so I think that as we're thinking about the next wave of crypto and blockchain, revolution, I think that's going to involve in large part bringing gamers and other types of folks into this field. And so I basically just want to serve as a resource on this podcast, to answer people's questions about crypto and sort of demystify it, because I actually think that there's more similarities than dissimilarities. So
if I can real quick, to the regular user that isn't deep in crypto yet, I want to put into context how important Uniswap is and how integral to the ecosystem this technology. Uniswap isn't just another piece of code. It was one of the first really great applications of automation in the space that totally changed the old bookmaker model that classic exchange uses, where this is just a smart contract, and then I want to swap, you want to swap, and then this internet magic kind of makes it happen. And this has been cloned and copied and iterated on by so many different people, so many different times. This was one of the nexus points for decentralized finance. So when it comes to crypto, I often like to say, a little jokingly, but also pretty seriously, that 90% of crypto kind of sucks. A lot of it is really not created with the best intentions in mind and has some sort of a catch to it. And maybe we get rich, but someone else is getting super rich. There are very few, legitimacy is really a rare nectar in the blockchain space. And Uniswap is very high on that list, I think, of keeping true to the blockchain and crypto ethos. So I mean, when I saw that Secret picked up a crypto sponsor, I was like, okay, this isn't just a crypto sponsor, it's freaking Uniswap. This is amazing. These are two of my favorite brands coming together. I mean, this is the kind of stuff you like to see. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there. And yeah.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you.
that's exactly, the type of decision making that we went through as well, because this is our first sort of entry point into the crypto world, right? Our partnership with Uniswap, and during that time, we're kind of like, well, like you said, there's like a whole bunch of projects out there that are, maybe not that well meaning, or maybe not that good, or have like no function, and when there are other esports teams that also have picked those sponsors or have done projects in this space, and it's kind of like, when you do a project that there's no like real sort of purpose to it, or no real good purpose to it, then the community like instantly catches on, sees it, and is like flames you for it, right? And
Yeah.
what we wanted to do was, we wanted to do something that was, we wanted to have a partnership that was not just like, we're going to sell you some like NFT wallpapers, or we're going to like, shill some coins to you, or like something like that. We did not want to do any of that stuff, right? What we wanted to do was introduce our fan base and our community to the concepts of decentralized finance and all the adjacent sort of topics, and which naturally leads into gaming, right? But we wanted to do something like this webcast that we're doing now, which is like very educational, which is like, hey, let's try to demystify some of these more complicated, buzzwords or concepts that you might hear about, and then let's just talk about like how what are some of the great use cases and some of the great potential use cases that could come out of this, that we're all really looking forward to. Like, for example, like the interoperability between games, right? Like, what if you could level up your avatar and your items, and then from this one game, and then now there's like this other game, and you can just take that over, right? Because you own the asset, right? You own like the cosmetics of it, and you could just take that asset, the skin, and just put it into this other game because it's interoperable. Like, that to me is super cool, right? Those types of
Yeah.
use cases I'm like really looking forward to.
Absolutely. I mean, there's been little examples of that with Axie, where in the past we had a community member make like a flappy Axie version where you use your
Mhm.
Axies in a flying game. I think there was a racing game called Axie Sushi or something like that. And there was even like a little prototype of Axies in Decentraland, kind of following you around like Pokemon style, like Pikachu's out of his Pokeball and you've got your favorite Axie kind of at your side. Like, I think that's really cool. And when I envision the metaverse, right, and maybe that's something that we could talk about briefly, since it seems like there's going to be a battle for the metaverse, right? Facebook is now rebranded to be Meta, short for metaverse, and we just saw the news that Microsoft purchased Blizzard Activision in the press release with the explicit kind of strategy to build out the metaverse. So this is a metaverse play, and we're still not sure if are they trying to build, quote, their own metaverses? Do they understand that the metaverse is just one big thing of interoperability? Are they going to be battling each other while the rest of us are over here building the real decentralized metaverse that is actually kind of cross-platform for the stuff that people really care about? I don't know. I'm curious what you guys think about that one.
Yeah, Jerry, maybe to chime in on that one. I think the inoperability is something more really important when it comes to creating a metaverse. I think what a lot of these institutions are currently doing with M&As is that they're currently doing the inoperability, but within the walled garden approach. Like, for example, okay, I am presenting to you Ready Player One within the universe of, say, a Microsoft with its acquisition of Bethesda, or your acquisition of your ATVI. So we might see like a Tracer and Master Chief interacting. That would be really cool because most of it's like the Avengers, man. Like, having these interactions is really awesome. So I think Sony might be doing something else. Axie in itself, because of its community, is currently doing something in itself as well. So I'm curious to see how this will affect the trend, because this isn't a one-time M&A. I think this will affect like how industries would move, and I think this is something net positive in terms of being able to see, okay, so you really want to see like an Avengers type of Endgame or Infinity War where everyone is in the mix, right? So um what will be the moves of like a Sony, right? Or what will be the moves like a Sega or whatnot. So I'm interested to know what would like an Axie, what would actually be doing in terms of the metaverse.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
On the metaverse, I just want to make a quick analogy for people, because I actually think that this term is it can be really unappealing to people, right? It just seems sort of crazy. So from my perspective, I think, and I'm going to get a little nerdy. So I think the metaverse is basically like what you choose to give value to in the digital world, right? Like the metaverse to me might just be like some skins or something, right? Like it's a piece of digital. It's a digital artifact that I place some subjective value on because it has value in in an ecosystem that I care about. And so I want to talk about forking. So like let's say there's a Dota patch, and you know your a hero you hate like gets super buffed, or there's a new hero, and always the new hero is super OP for a patch before it gets nerfed back down. If you're really upset and you
Marcy.
don't like the gameplay, yeah, if you don't like the gameplay that's resulting from this patch, you actually don't have an out, right? Like you can complain on Reddit, but the games are going to be the game. You know, there's a ban maybe, which kind of helps, but that's just how the meta is. What's interesting to me about the metaverse is that if you build it properly and it's actually decentralized, you can potentially have an out by forking the existing state of a game, of a piece of, you know, of an ecosystem, a collection of artifacts, and you can actually take that community to a new place if you so want. And I don't think that this is a typical behavior. You wouldn't want to see this on a regular basis. That would mean the sort of original creators were doing something horribly wrong. And I think in the happy case, you do have these long-term ecosystems where a company or a group or a collection of communities are developing you know, a game in the long term. But I think that it's important to have, at least as an option, this fork where you disagree with a core balance change that was made to a game, or the developers sort of go rogue, or they disappear or whatever. The ability to continue, at least in theory, this game, you know, as a sort of separate entity by forking it in a way that is only possible with blockchain. You know, you can't fork Dota, right? Like it's just, you can't do that. I think that's a really interesting thing. So to me, the metaverse is basically, you know, I think an important sort of tenet of the metaverse should be that you can, in theory, fork away the things that you care about in an ecosystem, and there's no fear that your beloved sort of skins or game mechanics are going to disappear forever. If you care about it, it's like OSRS, right? Like no one likes our OSRS except for this like really hardcore community, but if they want that, they can go play that, and it exists sort of forever. And so I think that I think that should be taken to its extreme, and that's a really interesting aspect of this whole metaverse angle.
Yeah, Noah, maybe it's like the multiverse, right?
Totally.
Maybe it's like a
Yeah, maybe
multiverse
that's
of
a good way
games,
to say
right?
it. Yeah.
Migs is sponsored by Marvel. It's like all his analogies are like the Avengers, the multiverse.
I'm currently consuming their content, so that's why.
Is the Witcher also a Marvel property?
Oh, I'm playing The Witcher right now, so
Oh.
7 years into it. But John, I want to ask you, like, a good topic that was discussed a while ago was the centralization of community. At the end of the day, it's what the community is actually one of the key stakeholders in actually making something resilient, no? As an Axie or communities uh, for that matter. So my question would be: would we see in the future like Team Secret regarding its loyal fan base with like NFTs, with say for example, or even delve into the metaverse itself, like having the way I see it is like Poppy like having an interaction with dubstep or whatnot.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all a possibility. I think it just needs to follow sort of our philosophy for the types of things that we endorse and the types of things that we get into, right? I think if it feels like, you know, we're just trying to do something with the community that's like not you know, not with like the noblest of intentions, or doesn't really seem to have like any much utility, then we wouldn't do it, right? But if it's like something that has like utility, if it's like, oh, you know, we can have a way for Team Secret to interact with folks in this game with Team Secret IP or something like that, then I don't know, I think it has like tremendous amount of utility. It's like really interesting. Like, what if we could create, you know, a cosmetic skin for a Dota hero that's like Team Secret like themed, right? It's pretty cool, right? Like we would do that. I think we would do that because it's really cool. We're not trying to do anything that's like, you know, that the community I think wouldn't want. So I think what we try to do is we try to pick out projects, and we try to pick out things where we think it would be of interest to the community. And then, you know, if it sucks, the community will let us know very quickly, and then we'll change course. You know, I'm not going to promise that everything we do, like the community is going to agree with, but I will say that we generally try to pick out things where we think it actually has some function to make the interaction between us and the community and whatever we're doing better.
And I think in the gaming space in particular, there's always this desire to be looking out for the next big thing. And this is true in a lot of like emerging industries, especially related to tech, where nobody wants to be the first, but then nobody wants to be the last. So there's this thing that happens where people are a little bit hesitant to be the guinea pig. And then once there's proof of concept, it's like the floodgates are open, and then nobody wants to be left behind. So I see Web3 as a bit of a function of that, where, I've heard some advice from different financial advisors say, even if you're not super big on crypto, put 5% of your portfolio in crypto. Like, it's big enough and established enough now that it's worth just a small bet, even in case that 5% is able to get some movement. So some of this emerging tech is pretty cool. And in an ecosystem like Axie, part of what makes the play to earn or the play and earn kind of gaming model work is that our take rate as a developer is substantially lower than most in the traditional space. We take like 5% from marketplace transactions, we make some from the breeding cost, but outside of that, like 90% or so of the value in the economy, when you look at the millions of dollars being exchanged in the marketplace, that's players selling products to other players. We don't sell anything anymore. We sold the original Axies, and now it's just players breeding them with each other, and then they sell those Axies to new players. So that's kind of what allows the business model to happen, and like why play to earn is possible. And so many people can be playing this game and using it as a source of income. It's because all of that money is in the hands of the players fundamentally. And that's really cool and really powerful, and also what makes it an interesting and complicated economy to try to balance on the scale that Axie's now reached with millions of players. But I think if you're a gaming org, I would certainly be intrigued just to have a small piece of that to see where it's going, because it's totally new to this gaming space.
Yeah. Jerry, wanted to ask you that you mentioned a while ago Web 3.0. What exactly is Web 3.0, and how does it affect, like, or how is it influenced or affected by cryptocurrencies and NFTs? Like, is it is it like a juxtapose, or is it tied together? Are these two separate mutually exclusive concepts?
Yeah, it's another one of these terms that probably has a variable definition depending on who you're talking to, but sort of like how we've seen the web go into these big evolutions. Like Web 0.0 is sort of that static internet of the 90s, where it was just web pages that loaded information, and then these companies like Google and Amazon and various others started building these like more interactive layers. And the internet, kind of as we know it right now, is what we kind of call Web 2.0. It's this pretty interactive experience, but it relies heavily on these big centralized forces, these servers that are owned by a company, or like IP that are owned by a company. And as users, we're kind of the product, and they own pretty much all of our data and our ability to interact with it. So Web 3 would be this kind of decentralized, blockchain-based web future. Ethereum, if you think about it as sort of like a world computer, like this open database that anybody can interact with if you have access to the blockchain, aka just have a device that's connected to the internet. That's the core foundation of Web 3. So cryptocurrency would be, I think, what most people call like the money of the internet, and that the centralized backbone is what kind of has allowed Web 3 to emerge for the first time. Maybe Noah could add on to that a little bit.
No, you nailed it, Zaire. I think that's totally right. And yeah, I think it's about changing your relationship to the internet as well. I think we're really used to getting things for free, which is great. I mean, like, Twitter, free to play games like this. These are great things that we're getting for free. But there is money sort of changing hands behind the scenes, right? Like there's ads. That's pretty transparent, but then there's things like your data that's a little less transparent. Like it's not clear why that's valuable to you, but it is. People are actually paying to they're paying to understand things about you. They're targeting you with ads, and nothing about this is horrible or nefarious, but I think it's not ideal. And I think that to me, just from the thousand foot view, it's really Web3 is really about changing your relationship as a consumer to digital services. And I think it's about making the economic interactions that are made possible by you interacting with a service. It's about making that extremely transparent, and it's very clear where the value flow is going and who's providing value to what. And often it's actually reciprocal. Like you as a user of a free to play game or Twitter or whatever, one of these free services, you're actually giving a lot of value to the company, as well as the company giving value to you. And so I think making that flow of value bi-directional and explicit is actually really valuable. And that's where some of the interesting things like play to earn and play and earn, it's good. It's like in some ways it sort of makes you, the sort of moneyness of it almost makes you turned off at first. But then when you really think about it, it's like, well, there's nothing wrong about, money as long as, or trying to make money or speculating, right? Like as long as it's framed appropriately. I think that, it's actually good to understand the risks and the value that respective parties are bringing to a relationship that's primarily online. And so I think that's just making things explicit and transparent in digital interactions is what's important about Web3 to me.
And as an extension of that for Web3, like this changes the potential for ownership. And I think there's a general ethos and a big drive for a lot of these projects that feel like they can be community run to also be primarily community governed. And for Axie specifically, that's one of the cool things about our roadmap. Within the next 2 years or so, there will be enough of our governance token, AXS, distributed to the players that it won't just be Sky Mavis that will be the sole decision maker anymore. And over time, Axie will become what they call a DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization. It's kind of like an LLC or another business structure, but for crypto decentralized Web3. And it'll be a game that will actually be governed by its players, and we'll have to build some sort of a representative democracy model. We'll probably have a mayor or a governor or somebody that kind of leads the thing, and we'll have politics within Axie. And that's a totally new take on a game that has a lot of value in its economy, rather than us being this centralized kind of dictatorship, authoritarian regime over the structure of the game. It's going to be more democratic than that, at least, and kind of decentralized in nature. And there's certainly a lot of risks that come along with that, but that kind of puts it on us to try to build a framework that incentivizes long-term thinking and the kind of stuff that'll make this sustainable. So to me, that's part of what makes all of this so exciting, and why Axie isn't just like another game or another opportunity to get a salary because my broadcasting career wasn't going the way I wanted it to. It's like, to me, this is like one of the coolest live experiments happening right now, kind of at scale.
So it's kind of going to be like how Dota is governed by the Reddit community.
Yeah.
I will leave now.
No, John, I wanted to ask you. You were mentioning about players governing Axie. So what does it mean? Like, it kind of seems like highly theoretical, but when you make it into like, what examples can you provide? Like, is it more of like, okay, we want a season to be 6 months instead of 3? Or is it more of, okay, I want the background to be blue instead of red? Like, can you provide examples of how player governed games are being, are actually exercising governance?
I think that EVE Online is actually a pretty good example. It's one that I haven't played before. Every time I've wanted to get into it, people I know that play it have said, if you haven't started yet, then don't. And 5 or 10 years removed from that, I wish I had started a little bit. But that game is very highly economic driven. It's sort of a data resource acquisition game. So real money goes into building these ships, and there are situations where it's like hardcore mode, and if the ship explodes, it's just gone. So like, these millions of dollars can be lost, and it's made headlines before. And I think CCP is the name of the developer that owns that game. And I think EVE's been out for like over 20 years now. So they've learned a lot about how to balance their economy. But I think historically there have been moments where they make a change and then it has these big ripple effects and they go, oh my gosh, I can't, So I think they adopted some sort of governance model where like every year they have some kind of election and there's however many seats, like 15 or something, and people have term limits and different people in the community get voted in, and they facilitate the kind of gathering of data and voting on economic decisions and various other big things that are really impactful to the community. And it helps take pressure off the developers, and it also gives the community a taste of how difficult some of this stuff is. So I don't have all the details of it, but from the bits that I've heard, that's one of the better examples of centralized gaming that's already started to utilize these kind of governance models. I think we're going to start exploring.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Noah, anything to add to that?
No, yeah. I mean, I think that sometimes it can feel a little overwhelming. So, as a developer in the space, there's so many levels of experimentation going on. I mean, we're building these smart contracts, which are written in a sort of novel programming language, and they're placed inside of this, world computer, as I already termed it, which is another sort of very interesting new space. And then as a third sort of layer on top of that, we're experimenting with like, almost government and politics, right? Because, ultimately governance is a huge aspect of a lot of projects in Web3. And so I think there are a lot of different, we're sort of operating on a lot of different levels, and there's a lot of different things being tried. And so Yeah, I mean, I think it remains to be seen what the best models for, a community-owned, a player-owned ecosystem looks like. But it's really important that we try and experiment, right? Because there's no other way to learn. And frankly, like the metas of the world, the Activisions of the world
Hmm.
are clearly making plays. And I think that that's good. And I don't want to discourage that at all. And like, I love, we all love the games that like Riot and Valve have produced, et cetera. But it's really important that we have sort of a bit of more of a ground up sort of community driven and, startup driven alternative to these really monolithic sort of existing Web2 style organizations. And I think that we really need to, again, experiment and work out what scaling up a sort of community looks like in a decentralized way, in a Web3 native way. And that's what Axie is doing. That's sort of what we're doing in a bit of a different domain, right? Decentralized finance. But I think that is what is interesting and valuable about this sort of experiment. And I think that there's been a lot of early validation that we're on the right track. Like people clearly care. They're putting their money, they're putting their time, more importantly,
Hmm.
into these decentralized finance applications, into these, Axie Infinity games, in, all these types of things. So I think it's about, hearing feedback from your community, iterating, experimenting with what users can control, what you might need sort of a company to do for now, things like this. So I don't have like a concrete takeaway, but I think that it's important that we do this because the stakes are high. And I, for one, don't want Meta controlling, 85% of what I'm doing online, in 10 years, right? Like I want there to
Yeah.
be a vast variety of companies and games and communities, et cetera. So
And one of the coolest things about this conversation, as maybe a general takeaway that I like to always throw out there, is that some centralization is good. People often
Hmm.
frame things as this binary 0 or 1, centralized or decentralized. And very few systems operate effectively in those extremes. And some balance in the middle is really that sweet spot where there are times where a little bit of streamlined centralization can really increase efficiency and it doesn't reduce security that much. And it can still be mostly decentralized, but you rely on, a couple of key figures that are trustworthy and maybe have something that they've staked. That's, I often think of like a proof of reputation model is sort of part of this community building. And reputation is one thing that does stick with you. But yeah, there's a lot of problems we need to solve. How do we prove that one human is one account online? Somebody recently just got busted with like 16 different Twitter accounts that were all kind of, arguing with each other and trying to play Senator Palpatine a little bit across these different projects. And that kind of stuff is scary, almost how easy it is to build up these different personas just as a single person. And that's like an attack vector on governance. So we need to figure out ways to detect this and mitigate this without completely violating people's privacy and just, copying what exists in the centralized world. All these things are part of that spectrum I think Noah talked about of layers of experiments all happening at the same time. So it really can feel overwhelming. But to me, it's like the goal isn't 100% decentralization. It's just progressively more decentralization and building with that mindset and trying to accommodate that wherever you can in the stack, where the sacrifices aren't as large.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I think the conversation around centralization and decentralization to me is just like every aspect has its place and a time where it's most appropriate. And I like to give like Dota analogies, right? So it's just like when you have a Dota team, and you need some strong leadership or you need in-game shot calling, right? We need like the centralization of like somebody's just like, we're gonna go do this, right? This is what we're gonna do, and you need everybody on the same page to go like do that thing. Otherwise, like your play fails. But then you don't want it so centralized where it's just like one person's just like kind of controlling like four other mindless robots, right? You want everybody to give input. Everybody needs to feed information, and everybody needs to give like new strategies, new drafts, new ideas. And everybody needs to bring like their own their own point of view to how we play together, and then somehow we'll just cobble together this like amazing view of like how we should play. right? And then things really click where you have that good balance of like bringing in all the different perspectives and all the different voices into this like cohesive like path forward. And then you have like somebody who's like, okay, we're doing this now, and then those things also work. So I think it's like having that type of balance is really important. But so the second thing I want to mention is like through this process, I think one of the most important things to keep in mind is don't be discouraged by or turned off by failures, because there
Mm.
will be many failures in this road towards experimenting, right? You have some concepts that are really good and some like use cases and some projects that turn out to be really good, and then there's going to be like crash and burn failures, right? And sometimes very public ones. So you can't you shouldn't go to the headlines and see like, oh, this crypto project failed and therefore like all crypto is bad now. Like we need to keep things in mind that this is a stage where we're experimenting, and we're trying to figure out what are the right models, because nobody has sort of the right answer yet, but we're all trying to figure out like how do we get closer to the right answer for these things.
John, I
Yeah.
think to add into this conversation, I think the modes of centralization and decentralization is a function or derivative of regulation at this point in time, because it does matter whether, okay, at the end of the day, it won't be a wild west every day or until until the world ends or whatnot. At the end of the day, there will be some form of regulation. But my question for, I think, for Uniswap and for Axie, not really into, well, not really much into regulation, but how does your institutions act as good actors in a sea of bad actors per se? Like, how do you promote governance? How do you promote being good actors in a space where it's easy to fund, it's easy to actually do rug pulls and whatnot?
Real quick on the regulation note, I do think you're right that regulation is inevitable, but I also think our space moves kind of at turbo speed, and it's a feature,
Hmm.
not a bug, right? Like as
Hmm.
Noah said, 95% of their code is open source. A huge part of the Axie code is open source. I don't know what percentage, but it is relatively easy for people to go, hey, that's a really cool idea. Copy paste, and now I'm going to tweak it. And what if I do that with more rewards? That was
Hmm.
sort of what Sushi Swap did. And like that's great for good actors because they don't have to reinvent the wheel and they can just continue building on top of the stack. But it also opens the doors for like not great actors that can just take that and then do not great tweaks with it. So it cuts both ways, but ultimately it lets us move really fast. And governments are historically bad at moving quickly with regulation and like keeping up with the changing technology. So I think they'll really struggle to like nail it in one fell swoop, and this is going to be an ongoing kind of arms race. And I
Hmm.
think the bleeding edge of crypto is just going to continue to outpace most like large regulatory bodies like the EU or like the United States, for example. But in terms of being good actors, I think some of it is like transparency in your founders and the people that are building. Having faces on it is a huge sign. There's a lot of anonymous projects out there. And in terms of our community building, it's constantly restating our mission and trying to cultivate an audience that really buys into our mission and building our community to be the best form of itself and hold each other accountable and call out bad actors. And like we're really trying to build from the ground up and do it the right way so that we can end with the best possible product. We really think about Axie as a universe, and we think about it in intervals of 1 year, 5 year, 10 year, 20 year kind of vision. And that Axie Nation, we're building a digital nation. It's not a joke. That's really how we see it. And a digital nation will need a headquarters at some distant point in the future. So we see ourselves as the alpha of that universe, not just the alpha of the Axie card game. So yeah, you have to having a hardcore community that was with us in the bear market has really helped us
Hmm.
maintain like a community that holds on to core values as we've scaled into millions of people. And we kind of feel lucky actually that we built and survived in majority a bear market historically.
Indeed, yes.
Yeah, I mean, you nailed it, Zaire. Those are, I mean, hugely important and really valuable points. Though, just the one other thing I want to add is that, I think at Uniswap we often say we're building for like 10 or 100 years, and I mean, I think that that's obviously taken a bit to its extreme at 100, but even just for example, like when we were writing our most recent piece of code, there was actually an overflow bug that's going to happen in like 230 years from now. And we actually noted that out and like we called it out. And it's kind of funny, right? It's like, there's actually kind of a low probability that code is going to be around in 230 years. But you do see these like Y2K bugs, they do happen periodically. Stuff overflows and suddenly, like your calendar app doesn't work, or like, you can't log into whatever. And so I think, aligning yourself with the long-term interests of your product, of your community is how we sort of keep ourselves accountable in a lot of ways. We're really building for a long-term future. And I think there's a lot of short-termism, which is great because that's how you experiment. And like, that's how, forks can be really valuable because they expose parts of your, they're taking different directions, and that exposes some really interesting insights potentially. But I think it's also important to be aligned, again, on a medium to long-term basis with your community. And so I think building for like 10 years out is a really great way to keep yourself focused and honed in on the important things. Because, if this is going to work, it's going to be a long-term, if crypto and blockchain is going to work, it's going to be this, like, it's going to be embedded into the fabric of how things work. And I think that if you're not building for that, like, why are you here in some ways? So I think that's a really important thing, to do basically in the absence of a lot of, common sense regulation that is, frankly, a bit lacking now for reasons as I already mentioned. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, wanted to ask John, like, Ziori and Noah mentioned like what their methods or their processes for being good actors in the space for cryptocurrencies and NFTs. Like, how does Team Secret identify? Okay, Uniswap is a good partner. We'll partner with Uniswap, or Axie is quite the sustainable play to earn game. We'll actually invest and partner with Gemini, right? Like, what makes you invest on a game? Like, is it just merely the esports roadmap or the game sustainability? Like, what factors do you look at?
I'm gonna kind of break it up into two parts. So the first part is like, how do we choose partners, and how do we choose projects to involve ourselves
Correct.
in?
Correct.
For us, like we really care about our brand, we really care about our community, we really care about how we're perceived, right? So, we are willing to take risks, right? So there are sometimes we do things that is like first to market, or one of the first to market, and it may not be well understood, and maybe we get flamed for it a little bit. But generally,
Mhm.
the projects that we take on, it kind of passes like a philosophical sort of gut test, right? Of like, hey, is this thing like, trying to do something shady or something funny? Or is this thing like, hey, could this thing actually have some utility? Could this actually be something that, is good for the community? Could this be something that, could be something that's interesting for our fans and our audience? And sometimes, the execution of it doesn't work out, right? Sometimes we come in with the best of intentions, or we do this project and like the execution doesn't work out, and that's okay, right? To us, it's just like, yeah, we'll learn from that failure. But in general, like, it has to pass sort of the gut test of like, hey, this feels good, or this feels like a total scam. And we choose the ones that are good, obviously. So that's kind of how we determine what projects and what partners we take on. The second thing is like it doesn't mean like we're all like roses and everything. We only do everything altruistically. Like for instance, we have like a betting partner. For instance, it's a bookmaker, and of course, it's like for us, it's like, oh, okay, betting is a vice, sure, but like I go to the casino sometimes. It's fine, right? It's everybody's own choice. We choose a partner that is not trying to scam anybody, that is reputable, that is reliable, that people can interact with and feel good about, if that's something that they want to do. And we never push anybody to go check out this betting site. We don't really do that kind of stuff. So even when we take on partners that are sometimes like feel like they have vices, like a betting company, like we do it in such a way where we feel good about it, right?
Mhm.
So that's how we choose projects.
Yeah.
And the second thing is, how do we look at what teams and what games to get into? And so we look across a number of different filters, which is, well, we look geographically, right? So is it significant for our community, because we know where our fan base is, right? And we know like where our current teams are, right? Which is Europe and Southeast Asia. So geographically, does it really hit into, is it going to be relevant to our audiences? We look at whether or not the game has a significant enough of a player base to actually have a community, right? And to be potentially interesting for our audience to get into, right? So kind of the overall like user base or daily active users is quite important to us. And then the third thing is like we also look at the publisher, right? It's just like, you know, there are a lot of things in gaming and in esports that are unknown, that are coming, that could be like, we don't know what Axie esports looks like, right? But I know, like, you know, I know Zayori, I know like the things that you
Mhm.
talk about. I like your, you know, I'm aligned with like your philosophies for how you look at things. And so even though I don't know exactly like what the details are coming down the road, I know that, you know, this is probably something that we would want to be involved in, or we would be very, very interested in, simply because of those factors. And so, you know, we do look at like who we're working with and who are the important stakeholders within that community before we get into a particular game. And that's how we look at all of our esports teams.
Yeah.
And
Just yeah. Sorry. Just wanted to lighten the mood. Basically, for everyone who's watching, I think John indirectly confirmed a team secret Axie team for esports.
Yeah,
We'll
Yuri,
make the
you
Reddit
wanted to
post
say
someone.
something?
yeah, we got to figure out what those esports look like first. Just like real quick on like that note about sponsors, that was another big thing that appealed me about taking on this like leadership role in esports in the Axie space, is having like whatever, like $1.5 billion in the play to earn fund. That enables us to do so much in terms of the esports and competitive ecosystem, really without the reliance of third-party sponsors. And when I look back at my like 6 years as CEO of Moonduck, I'm really proud of the stuff that we produced. But if you take the betting sponsors out of that, Moonduck didn't exist. We would not have been able to do the things that we did. And they really had a lot of leverage over us and our broadcast. And like John said, I'm very envious to hear him say that, you know, we work with betting sponsors, but we don't do all this, you know, kind of over the top sellout stuff. I spent years of my broadcasting career like doing over the top sellout stuff for betting sponsors, and partially because no one else at the company wanted to do it. And it kind of came to that big decision of, do I want this event to happen or not? Is it worth it? And when I look back, I don't know that I can say I regret it, but it doesn't really feel great. And it's really cool that now we can build this ecosystem and build up the third parties that we want to work with, and just not have anybody have that leverage over us. It's really cool. And it also opens up to work with sponsors that we actually want to work with, you know. That's powerful. That's really powerful stuff. So yeah, well done, John. Well done.
Um, Yep, I just wanted to mention that I think last December the Philippines had its first Axie Community Creators Cup. Did really well. I think the viewership was around 30,000 on peak, but was averaging at in between 20 to 25,000 people
I
watching
think I think
over
it
just
peaked at like 45. Yeah,
correct.
the
Yes, just
grand
and just
finals. Yeah.
yeah, just on Facebook. So my question is, well, my insights and question is that one of the participants there actually got paid like on the day itself or probably a day after, and she showed the receipt like, okay, oh by the way, I was paid in AXS. This is my prize pool immediately, and it's very transparent. Like John wanted to ask you, like, what's your experience? Well, and comparing something decentralized as an Axie, like what you're seeing with Axie, a potential Axie platform for esports versus centralized organization for events and for esports.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think there's a lot of positives to look forward to. Like, for example, there's tournaments that we've played that, you know, we haven't been paid for a lot, you know, 3 years ago, right? And you know, if there's ways to make these sorts of transactions, you know, very transparent, very public, and almost like kind of guaranteed, like built into like, you know, a smart contract or whatever, I think
Hmm.
you know, it makes things kind of like, you don't need to focus on those things, right? Those things are like guaranteed, right? It's automated. You can just focus on
Correct.
actually creating the content. You can actually focus on making a good user experience. You can actually focus on the game itself, as opposed to this drama of like, okay, I played this tournament 6 months ago. Like, where, oh God, when am I going to get the invoice back for this one? You know, so you're not like really reliant or solely dependent on some of these centralized entities to do some of these things. And I think there's a lot of use cases that could be made for this.
Like even just locking up a prize pool in a smart contract to prove that it's there for
Yes.
distribution for the
Hmm.
tournament. And even if it's not immediate, let's say you want 2 weeks lag time just in case, you know, some allegations pop up or you want to investigate something,
Hmm.
because once you send the money, you're not getting it back, right? So I think it's fine to put in some kind of stop gaps like that. But even just transparently knowing the money's there and it's in a smart contract and it's locked until certain triggers happen. And then, I mean, this starts to get technical, but stuff like Chainlink, the oracles of the world that can verify these events that exist outside of blockchain and put that data into blockchain. Whoa, now we're really cooking with gas, right? We can really start taking this esports 2.0 to the next level. And as an extension of that, imagine something like the TI Open qualifiers that we used to have. What if you could start accumulating prize after you win like 1 or 2 rounds in the Open, and then every additional round you accumulate another, $1,000 or something? And because your user account in game that has your Axies is also your wallet, aka your bank account, like it just, as soon as the qualifier is over, we can just airdrop you the money based on your placement. If we could even pay down to like 10% of participants in an open qualifier for something on that scale, that would be like a huge step in terms of this like esports for everyone, and making it not just an upper elite 0.0001% of the best, but actually just the upper like 10% or 20% of competitive players that want to participate. That stuff is really cool, and it's like super possible. You say that to a blockchain engineer, they're like, oh yeah, no problem. That's like, dude, you just hit the button. That's a one button kind of deal.
Can confirm.
There we go. I wanted to ask Noah. Noah, is this true? Is this feasible?
Yeah, no, that's definitely. I mean, that's like what drew me to the space, right? Is the limit is really more about your imagination and your ability to build incentive mechanisms than the underlying payment infrastructure. And of course, we could get into the whole like backbone of why Axie is currently on a side chain and why they need that, and that's a really valuable thing for them right now, because high fees are definitely a reality, and I don't want to really get into that now, but there's definitely hope on the horizon, and yes, like decentralized mass sort of automated payouts are certainly part of the future.
Yeah.
Yeah. John, you were saying.
Oh, I was gonna say we've reached the end of our time, so we can either keep talking or we can shut it down. But I think we're actually over the allotted time slot. So
Too much fun.
Classic.
Yeah.
So I do want to thank the viewers tonight for tuning in, and I want to thank our esteemed guests for showing up and talking about these things. And we're actually over the allotted time because this is a very very intriguing space, and a lot of great points of view and a lot of great topics to talk about in this space.
I appreciate the invitation to be here. It's a lot of fun, and I love being able to talk about this stuff in more basic terms and try to make it more accessible, because I spend a lot of my time talking to people that are scared and they're convinced that they can't understand it. And you really can. And I think folks like us need to do a better job of making it more accessible and easier to understand. So I definitely want to thank everybody for listening tonight. And there's more and more resources out there. Keep working at it. I didn't understand this stuff overnight either. It took me months and months of coming back and reading and kind of bashing my head against the wall. So we're with you. It's a fun journey, and it's definitely worth it to go down the rabbit hole.
Yeah. On my end, maraming salamat, or thank you very much for watching the stream. Maybe next time I could brag to Ziori, hey man, look at me, I have my Axie investment already, and it's doing 2.5 MMR, man. Look at this. And it's meta and whatnot. So thank you very much for watching. If you have any questions, do access the Team Secret Discord, the Gemini Discord. It's you can ask all your questions there, and I think you can still apply for scholars, right, and whatnot. So hopefully you get accepted and whatnot. So handing it over to Noah and to John.
Well, I just want to say thanks, everyone. This was actually a load of fun. Not that I was expecting anything otherwise, but hopefully the viewers had fun as well. And yeah, I think I'm looking forward to any future episodes we do on this, John. And we'd love to have any and all of you guys back. And yeah, it was a ton of fun. And I think I'll leave it there, and we can maybe sign off.
Cool. Thank you, everyone. Signing off.
Bye-bye.